What's the quickest you've ever watched someone's true character come out? I collect trash for the city, same route for 6 years. One Tuesday, I lifted a heavy black duffel bag from behind a closed-down diner, and when I unzipped it, there was money inside, more than I had ever seen, bundled and banded. My first thought was that it was not mine, and that someone would come looking for it, so I did the honest thing. I took it straight to the police station, filed a report, and they told me there was a holding period. If no rightful owner claimed it within 90 days, and no investigation tied it to a crime, the money would legally go to me, the finder. I also asked them to add a line in writing, right there on day one, stating exactly what I would do if the money ever became mine. I told 2 people. That was my mistake. I told my mom, because I tell my mom things, and I told my best friend Dabney, because we had been friends since we were 8. By the end of that week, it felt like the whole town knew, and every single person who heard about it decided the money was somehow theirs. My mom called and said that since she and Dad had raised me and fed me and put a roof over my head for 18 years, the money should come to them, and they would give me an allowance from it. An allowance. I am 27. I said no, gently, and she got cold and said she didn't raise me to be selfish. My dad got on the phone and said a good child would already have handed it over without being asked. Then my boss, Logan, explained that since I found the bag on the clock in a city truck, the fine belonged to the department, which meant it belonged to him. He stopped smiling when I said the police report had my name on it, not the city's, and started writing me up for clocking in 2 minutes late. Then there was Reyes, a man I had a crush on for almost a year who had barely said 10 words to me before all this. Suddenly he was waiting by my truck with coffee, taking me to dinner, talking about our future like we had one. I asked him what my middle name was. He didn't know. He had known me for a year and didn't know my middle name, but he knew about the bag down to the dollar. The only person in my life who heard about the money and never once brought it up was Danielle, a woman I had known for 2 years who apparently understood that a bag I found on my route had nothing to do with her. The worst was Dabney. My best friend of 19 years came over with wine like it was a normal night, then said we should split it 50-50 because that is what real friends do. I reminded her that there was a real chance the true owner would come forward and I would hand back every dollar without blinking. She said if I really valued her, I would give her half right now. I told her the money wasn't a test of our friendship, but the way she was acting sure was. She left and didn't take the wine. The 90 days passed slowly. Logan got quiet after I mentioned calmly that writing someone up for clocking in 2 minutes late right after they refused to hand you a bag of cash might look strange to his bosses. Reyes drifted off the second I told him the money might not be mine. Dabney went completely silent. My parents kept calling. On day 91, the police called. No valid owner had come forward. No crime was tied to it. The money was legally, officially mine, every bundle of it. And here is the part nobody saw coming, because they were all too busy seeing the money. The line I had asked the police to add on day 1 stated that any money I kept would go to the diner's old owner, an elderly man who had lost the building to debt and had been sleeping in his car 2 blocks away the whole time. The bag had been his life savings, hidden behind his own diner. He had passed the week before the 90 days ended and could not claim it himself. So the money went to his only family, a granddaughter who had no idea it existed. I gave her all of it. My parents found out and the phone was already ringing. Anne's voice came through the speaker so calm it almost fooled me. She sounded like a mother who had just come home from church. She said, "So I heard you gave away our money." I closed my eyes because she had already told me everything I needed to know with those 2 words. Our money. I said, "It was never our money, Mom." She did not snap. She just let out a long breath and said she was not angry. She was hurt. She needed to know if her and Dad had crossed my mind for even 1 second. That was worse than yelling. If she had screamed, I could have held my ground without thinking twice. But she sounded wounded. I felt a flicker of guilt I did not want to feel but could not stop. Then there was a shuffle and Leighton's voice came through. My dad is not a quiet man, but this time he spoke low and steady, like he was tired, and he said his mother had cried all morning and he was not calling to fight. He just wanted me to understand what I had done to her. I said I was sorry they were upset. I really was, but that money belonged to a man who died alone in his car 2 blocks from his own building, and his granddaughter had nothing, and I could not have kept it. Then Anne was back, her voice tighter now, higher, like she was holding something back with both hands. She said, "I am your mother. That girl is nobody to you. You chose nobody over me." Her voice broke on that last word. Not fake broke, real broke. She said, "Did I know what it was like to not know what happens next?" Leighton's body was giving out. His knees were bad. She could not work the hours she used to. They had nothing put away, and when I called her about that money, she thought this is it. This is God using our son to take care of us, the way we took care of him. And then I gave it to some girl they had never met. I could not say anything, because she was not lying. Not about the fear. I knew my dad's knees were bad. I knew they had no savings. I was sitting on the edge of my bed holding the phone actually thinking, did I make a mistake? Should I have given them something? That silence sat between us for maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an hour. And Anne heard it. She felt it the way only a mother can feel it when her kid is about to fold. And that is when she pushed. She said, "You owe us this. 18 years. You owe us." Just like that. Not a request, not a plea, a bill. And it was like someone flipped a switch inside my chest. The guilt just left. It did not fade out slowly. It disappeared. Because I understood what had just happened. She had walked me through the fear and the vulnerability and the tears, and none of it was fake exactly, but all of it was aimed. She was not sharing her fear with me. She was loading it into a sentence and pointing it at my chest, and when she thought I was soft enough, she pulled the trigger. "You owe us." That is not something a scared mother says. That is something a person says when they believe their love came with a price tag and the bill is due. I took a breath and let it out slow, and I said, quietly, not angry, not cold, just clear, "You raised me, and I am grateful. But you did not raise me, so I would owe you. You raised me, so I would do the right thing." And I did. The line went dead. About 20 minutes later, a text from Leighton came through. It said, "Your mother is done with you. I hope you're happy. Done with me." Like I was a subscription they were canceling. Within 2 days, my phone was lighting up with relatives I had not heard from in months, all saying the same thing in slightly different words. "Your mom told me what you did. Family takes care of family. Anne does not lose quietly. She builds an army." Then the next morning, Dabney was at my door. Not the version who had shown up with wine and a 50-50 pitch 3 months ago. This version had red eyes, no makeup, and a folder pressed against her chest like a shield. 19 years is not something you throw away at the door, even when the last 90 days have given you every reason to. I stepped to the side and let her in. She sat on the couch in the spot she always sits and told me she was wrong. She had been sitting with it for 3 months and was ashamed. She tried to take a piece of something she had no claim to, and she knew it. Her voice cracked when she said she missed her best friend. I said I missed her too, and I meant it. For about 30 seconds it felt like we were going to be okay. But then she reached for the folder. Inside were printed pages about estate law and creditor claims. She said Anne had called her last week. If Dabney could convince me to say the money was given under emotional duress, Anne would cut her in. Dabney told Anne no, but her mom had made a point she could not ignore. Did I even talk to a lawyer before giving it away? Because if the old man had debts, the money might have legally belonged to creditors, not his granddaughter. And if that was true, I could get it back. The relief that had been filling my chest dropped, like someone pulled a plug. I saw it all clearly. The red eyes were real. The apology might have even been partly real. But the apology was the door. She knocked on it with tears, and I miss you. And I opened it, and once I was soft, she opened the folder. Anne had given her a script, and the worst part is, she had performed it well enough that for 30 seconds I actually believed we were okay. I said, Dabney, did you come here because you miss me, or because my mom offered you money to change my mind? Her face fell. The quiet kind. The kind where the mask slips and the real face knows it has been caught. She said, both. Is that so wrong? I said, both cannot live in the same sentence. You either came here for me, or you came here for the money. Pick one. She picked up the folder, stood slowly, whispered that she just thought I should know my options, and walked out. She pulled the door shut with a soft click, and that click was somehow louder than any door slam I have ever heard in my life. I decided to go see Rafaela, not to ask for anything. I just needed to see, with my own eyes, that the money had gone where it was supposed to go. The address was on the east side, a small apartment above a laundromat, up a narrow staircase to a landing with one door and a potted plant that had seen better days. She opened the door, and her face shifted when she saw me. She said, "You are the man who brought my grandfather's money." I nodded and said I just wanted to make sure she was okay. She stepped back and held the door open. The apartment was small but clean, dishes drying in a rack, old pictures with fading colors on the wall, a kid's drawing taped to the fridge. She poured me coffee without asking and started talking about Ford. He had been fighting for that diner for years, taking out loans, borrowing from anyone who would help, because that diner was not just a business to him. It was the place he built with his hands when he was young, the place where Rafaela used to sit on the counter as a little girl and eat pancakes while he cooked for the morning rush. When it finally closed, he did not tell anyone how bad it was. He was too proud. She said he had told her once that he hid something behind the building for her, but she thought he meant a photograph or a letter. In his last few weeks, Ford had tried to reach her to tell her about the bag, but his phone had been shut off. He could not pay the bill. He was sleeping in his car 2 blocks from the diner, 2 blocks from everything he had hidden, and he could not even make a phone call. He sat there waiting, hoping someone honest would come along and do the right thing. And then he died, alone, in a car, 2 blocks from the building that used to have his name on it. I put my coffee down because my hands were not steady. I had unzipped that bag and thought about how much money it was. I had not known any of this. I had carried it like it was just money, and it was never just money. It was a man's whole life, packed into a duffel and tucked behind a wall because he had nothing else left to give and no way to deliver it himself. Rafaela told me she had paid off every debt Ford still had, every loan, every bill that had his name on it. She wanted his name to be clean. Then she told me she bought a headstone. Ford had been buried in an unmarked plot, just a patch of grass with nothing on it, no name, no date, nothing to say that a man who built a diner with his bare hands and fed half a town for 30 years was lying underneath it. The rest went into a savings account for her daughter. She looked at me across that table and said, "You did not just give me money. You gave my grandfather his dignity back." I had to look away for a second. Every single person who had spoken to me about that money had told me what I should have done differently, what I owed them, what I was too stupid or too soft to see, and here was the one person it was meant for. Then Rafaela's face changed. She said a woman had called her 2 days ago, said she was my mother, and told her the money had been given away by mistake, that I was not thinking clearly when I signed it over, that I was mentally unwell. I stared at Rafaela and let those words land one at a time. My mother had called this woman, a woman she had never met, who had just buried her grandfather in an unmarked grave and finally gotten the chance to put a stone on it, and told her I was mentally unwell. She lied about my sanity to a stranger to try to claw back money that belonged to a dead man's granddaughter. I said, I was in my right mind. I have never been more sure of anything. She nodded slow and steady and said, "That is exactly what I thought." I drove to my parents' house and knocked on the front door. I could have walked in. I used to just walk in. But that felt like something a son does when he knows he is welcome. And I was not sure I had been welcome since the day I said no. Anne opened the door. For half a second she looked surprised. Then her face went hard all at once. She lifted her chin and said if I came to apologize, I could start by calling that girl and telling her there was a mistake. I felt calm standing there. Not the fake kind. The kind you feel when you know exactly where you stand. I stepped inside past her and said, "I did not come to apologize. I came because you called Rafaela and told her I was mentally unwell, and we are going to talk about that right now." Leighton appeared at the end of the hallway and said to watch my tone. I looked at both of them and said, "I am watching everything. That is the problem." I walked into the living room. The same carpet I used to lie on watching cartoons. The same walls that held every birthday and every Christmas and every normal Tuesday night dinner when we were just a family. I said, "I know you called Rafaela. I know you told her I was not in my right mind. So before we say another word, tell me, did you actually believe that, or did you just say it because you thought it would work?" Anne looked at me like the question itself was disrespectful. Leighton said she was trying to protect this family. I said, she was not protecting this family. She was trying to take money from a dead man's granddaughter by calling me crazy. Those are not the same thing. Anne's voice came back tight and pressed thin. She said I had humiliated them, that everyone in town knew I found that money and gave it to some girl nobody had ever heard of instead of my own parents. People were talking. They thought she had raised an ungrateful son, decision. She said it like that was the worst part. Not the money, not the decision, the way it looked to other people. I said, then let them talk. I found a bag that belonged to an old man named Ford who died alone in his car, and his granddaughter used that money to pay off his debts and put a headstone on his grave. If that makes me ungrateful, then I do not know what grateful means to you. Anne flinched. She heard the part about the headstone and the old man dying alone, and I could see it register, but she pressed her lips together and looked away, because sitting with it would mean admitting she was wrong, and she was not going to do that. Leighton raised his voice for the first time. He said they had fed me and clothed me and worked themselves to the bone so I could have a life, and I could not even ask them what they thought before I threw it all away. I kept my voice level. The person who yells is the person who has run out of things to say. I said, I did pick up the phone. I told Mom on day one, and instead of saying she was proud of me for being honest, she told me to hand it over. Every call after that was worse. You did not want to talk about what was right. You wanted to talk about what was yours, and it was never yours. Leighton opened his mouth and closed it. Anne was not looking at him. She was looking at the floor, and her shoulders were shaking. It started quiet, just a trembling in her chin, and then her breath hitched hard, and the sound that came out of her was not the same sound I had heard on the phone. That sound had been sharp and aimed, a tool with a handle. This was the kind of crying that comes when you are too tired to perform anymore. She said, I am scared. Her voice was small, smaller than I had ever heard it. She said Leighton's knees were going. She could not work the hours she used to. They had nothing saved, and when I told her about that money, she thought maybe they would be okay. And then I gave it to someone else. I felt all of it. The pull, the gravity of being someone's child and hearing your mother say she is afraid and knowing she means it. Part of me was sorry, not for what I did, but for the fact that my mother is scared and I cannot fix it with a bag of money that was never mine to begin with. I pulled the chair from the corner and sat across from her. I said, Mom, I hear you, and I am sorry you are scared. I let it sit for a second so she could hear that I meant it. Then I said, but you did not come to me with fear. You came to me with a demand. You told me I owed you. You called a stranger and said I was mentally unwell. That is not fear. That is control. And I cannot let control be the reason I do the wrong thing. Anne did not argue. She did not come back with a line or a defense. She just sat there, and for the first time in this whole thing, she looked like someone who had heard what I said and did not have an answer for it. Leighton walked around the couch, slow, and sat down next to her with his hands on his thighs, staring at the floor. The room went still. Not the kind of still where someone is about to speak. The kind of still where nobody knows what to say because the truth just walked in and sat down, and there is no more room for anything else. I let the silence do its work. Then I said, I love you both. That has not changed. But I am not going to apologize for giving Ford's money to Ford's family. I will not carry the guilt you are trying to hand me. I did not choose a stranger over my parents. I chose doing right over doing easy. And if you think about it honestly, that is exactly what you raised me to do. That last sentence landed different than the rest. Anne's face changed to something I did not have a name for. The look of someone hearing their own words come back to them from a direction they did not expect. Because she did raise me to do the right thing. She told me that 100 times growing up. She told me to be honest, to help people. That character is what you do when nobody is watching. She just never thought those lessons would cost her something. I stood up. Anne opened her mouth and I gave her the space, but then she closed it again. Leighton did not look up or say a word. He just sat next to his wife on the couch in the living room where they had raised me, looking like a man who had been handed something heavy and did not know where to put it down. I walked to the door and stopped with my hand on the knob. I turned around one more time and said, when you are ready to talk to me like I am your son and not a bank account, I will be here. Neither of them said a word. I opened the door and walked out into the evening air. It was cooler than I expected. The sun was low and the sky was that color it gets right before dark. Not blue and not orange, but something in between that only lasts about 20 minutes. I got in my truck and looked at the house through the windshield. Same front door, same bushes, same porch light still on, even though there was plenty of daylight left. I thought about being 17 and telling my mom I was going to take the city job, and the way she had hugged me and said she was proud of me no matter what. That was the same woman sitting on that couch. That was the same woman who called a stranger and lied about my mind. Both of those things were true at the same time, and I was going to have to learn to live with that. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Danielle, the only person in my life who heard about the money and never once made it about herself. Her message said, how did it go? I typed back, I said what I needed to say. A few seconds later, she replied, proud of you. 2 words. That is all it was. 2 words from someone who never showed up with a folder or a script or a legal angle. Just 2 words that meant more than everything my parents and Dabney and Reyes and Logan had said to me combined over the last 3 months. I put the phone down and started the engine. I drove home with the windows down and the radio off, and I did not feel anything except clear.